What is up, you guys? We are back today and we have a special video for you guys. Today, me and Lucifer are going to be breaking down some very important topics, and we're going to be covering the intersection of a lot of the great teachers that I know of that have covered the topics that Neville talks about. Neville talks about manifesting. He talks about the law of assumption. He talks about living in the wish fulfilled, being able to get your desired reality, get your desired result through the use of the mind and the powers of the mind, living in the state, and all of these different concepts, talking about how reality is a reflection of the inner world. And these teachers that I'm talking about today, including Napoleon Hill, Emile Coue, they also talk about the same stuff, guys. So my goal with this video is to break this down in a way that is very, very easy to digest, with very easy to understand language. A lot of the times Neville can use a lot of flowery language, and a lot of the people that talk about his stuff online can be very verbose, and there's just so much out there. But I want to give you guys almost the exact science of how to do this, how to make sure that you understand in a very easy, like a 5-year-old can understand. So with that being said, guys, let's get into it. We're going to be discussing the OGs of manifesting success and using the laws of the universe to create your reality. As I said, bring your desired reality into being. Now, I mentioned Neville and I mentioned Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill is one of the forefathers of self-help, of, like I said, using the mind. He came before Neville's time, but you may think that there's not much of an overlap, and I'm going to break down why there is. He mentions Emile Coue in his book multiple times. Emile Coue was a French doctor who developed what in his time was commonly referred to as autosuggestion, but is more commonly referred to today as affirming. I just did that video about robotic affirming. Well, Emile Coue is the one who kind of pioneered this. Before the modern take on this, and all the modern teachers came about, he was the first one. So in Napoleon Hill's super famous book, Think and Grow Rich, which you may have heard of, as the book implies, it is about thinking, all about thinking and using the powers of the mind to grow riches, not only externally, but also to enrich one's life. And the many ways that we can through enriching our relationships. Shout out to all the SP manifestors out there. Also our experiences and living a fulfilled life in general. He believed that every one of us has a calling, and that by following our dreams, we can live a life full of achievement, success, and, like I said, fulfillment. So he spoke about Coue in regard to the importance of a positive mental attitude. The famous technique that really became famous because of him was every day in every way, I'm becoming better and better. That was his kind of trademark phrase because it was a catch-all. It's like people that he wanted to heal from various physical and mental ailments, he would use this technique, and they would imagine themselves in every way getting better and better. And so that's why he loved this technique. But of course, that wasn't the only thing that he was limited to using. That's just what he rose to fame with, and that was one of his favorite techniques. But he also spoke about the power of imagination, and so did Napoleon Hill. He spoke in length in his book, which I mentioned, Think and Grow Rich, about visualization, using the imagination. And who else do we know that also advocates the same thing? Yes, Neville is the one I'm talking about. Neville talks about using the power of your imagination. Napoleon Hill also had specific techniques for getting into states of relaxation and playing imaginal scenes in the mind, or mental movies in the mind. It doesn't matter what you want to call them: imaginal acts, imaginal scenes, mental movies, mental picturings, imaginations. It's all, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about using the power of your imagination. So I also have like some scenes and techniques that I've used out of Napoleon Hill's book. And I would love to, if you guys want me to break those down in a future video, I can share those techniques and what I've gotten out of them, how they've helped me, the ways in which I've used them, and kind of provide guidelines as far as the techniques he mentions in his books. So if you want me to do that, let me know down below in the comments. But now, to get into the meat and potatoes of this, I'm going to read a little bit from Emile Coue's book on the power of suggestion and auto-suggestion. I have notes here because this is going to be a very, very inclusive video, and you're going to, like I said, understand all of this stuff that we're talking about at a much deeper level by the time this video is done. So in his book, Self-Mastery Through Conscious Auto-Suggestion, Emile Coue writes, when the will and the imagination are opposed, it is always the imagination which wins, without any exception. In the conflict between the will and imagination, the force of the imagination is proportionate to the square of the will, or equal to the square of the will. Now, he makes a point that it's not an exact mathematical formula. It's not actually squared, but the point that he's making is that it is exponentially larger than the will, the power of the imagination. When the will and the imagination are in agreement, one does not add to the other, but they are multiplied. And again, making the point that when they are in alignment, it is not simple addition, but it is exponential. It is multiplied in power. And then the imagination can be directed. That is the other point he makes here. Now I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. So this is from chapter 5, How to Teach Patients to Make Autosuggestion. The principle of the method. Now he's talking about autosuggestion, which I mentioned, is what it is affirming. That this is the word that he used in today's day and age, we refer to this as affirmation. So the principle can be summed up in these few words. It is impossible to think of two things at once. That is to say that two ideas may be in juxtaposition, but they cannot be superimposed in our mind. Every thought entirely filling our mind becomes true for us and tends to transform itself into action. That's powerful. Every thought entirely filling our mind. What is the language that Neville uses? He uses the word saturate. He says you must saturate the mind with the feeling. Saturate the mind with a simple phrase that implies the feeling, such as, isn't it wonderful? Or thank you, thank you, thank you. In both cases, they're talking about the same thing. Whether you want to use, Neville says you must saturate the mind. Here, Coue is saying that your mind must be entirely filled with this thought. And he's also saying here that the mind cannot think of two things at once. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that that's how we saturate the mind, by the repetition of the affirmation, the repetition of the feeling, the repetition of the wish being fulfilled. So rather than allowing negative thoughts to creep in, you simply robotically affirm that this is true, that you are getting your result, you are getting your end desire. You are becoming this new version of yourself. You have your, let's say that in this example, you're buying a new house. Well, the house is yours. You know that it's yours. I mean, the housing market doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the situation, doesn't matter the external circumstances. I know that the house will be mine. I know that the house will be vacant. I know that the house will be available. You saturate the mind. You fill your mind with this. So thus, he continues on. If you can make a sick person think that her trouble is getting better, it will disappear. If you succeed in making a kleptomaniac think that he will not steal anymore, he will cease to steal, etc., etc. This training, which perhaps seems to you an impossibility, is, however, the simplest thing in the world. It is enough, by a series of appropriate and graduated experiments, to teach the subject the ABCs of conscious thought. And then he goes on to reveal a few experiments. And if you guys want, I can break those down in a later video. I think what is far more useful than breaking down these experiments for the purpose of this video is this other excerpt from the book. And this is from chapter 2, called The Will and the Imagination. We mentioned before that if the will is opposed to the imagination will always beat out the will. So check this out. If you need proof of that, here it is. If we open up a dictionary and look up the word will, we will find this definition. the faculty of freely determining certain acts. We accept this definition as true and unattackable, although nothing could be more false. This will that we claim so proudly always yields to the imagination. It's an absolute rule that admits of no exception. Blasphemy, paradox, you will exclaim. Not at all. On the contrary, it is the purest truth, I shall reply. In order to convince yourself of it, open your eyes, look around you, and try to understand what you see. You will then come to the conclusion that what I tell you is not an idle theory, offspring of a sick brain, but a simple expression of a fact. Suppose that we place on the ground a plank 30 feet long by 1 foot wide. It is evident that everyone will be capable of going from one end of the other of this plank without stepping over the edge. But now change the conditions of the experiment and imagine this plank placed at the height of the towers of a cathedral. Who then will be capable of advancing even a few feet along this narrow path? Could you hear me speak? Probably not. Before you had taken 2 steps, you would begin to tremble. And in spite of every effort of your will, you would be certain to fall to the ground. Why is it then that you would not fall if the plank is on the ground? And why should you fall if it is raised to a height above the ground? Simply because in the first case, you imagine that it is easy to go to the end of the plank, while in the second case, you imagine that you cannot do so. Notice that your will is powerless to make you advance, even if you imagine that you cannot. It is absolutely impossible for you to do so. If tilers and carpenters are able to accomplish this feat, it is because they think they can do it. Vertigo is entirely caused by the picture that we make in our minds that we are going to fall. This picture transforms itself immediately into fact in spite of all our efforts, all the efforts of our will. And the more violent these efforts are, the quicker is the opposite to the desired result brought about. Let us consider the case of a person suffering from insomnia. If he does not make any effort to sleep, he will lie quietly in bed. If, on the contrary, he tries to force himself to sleep by his will, the more effort he makes, the more restless he becomes. Have you not noticed that the more you try to remember the name of a person which you've forgotten, the more it eludes you until, substituting in your mind the idea, I shall remember in a minute, to the idea, I have forgotten, the name comes back to you of its own accord without the least effort. Let those of you who are cyclists remember the days when you were learning to ride. You went along clutching the handlebars, frightened of falling. Suddenly, catching sight of the smallest obstacle in the road, you try to avoid it, and the more efforts you made to do so, the more surely you rushed upon it. What was the state of mind? He mentions one last example here. Who has not suffered from an attack of uncontrollable laughter, which bursts out more violently the more one tries to control it? What was the state of mind of each person in these different circumstances? I do not want to fall, but I cannot help but doing so. I want to sleep, but I cannot. I want to remember the name of Miss So-and-so, but I cannot. I want to avoid the obstacle, but I cannot. I want to stop laughing, but I cannot. As you see in each of these conflicts, it is always the imagination which gains the victory over the will, without any exception. Yes. Obviously, this continues on, but this is the excerpt that I want to give you guys because it is a very, very powerful explanation of what he is describing here when he says that whenever the will and the mind are opposed, the imagination always beats out the will. And if you think about it, in your own life, that is why what people describe when they describe the ability to succeed is they describe the ability to imagine themselves doing it. That is why Neville preaches the imagination so much, doing the imaginal act. Through whatever laws of the universe that there are, this seems to be the case. The law of mentalism is the operational, foundational law according to the book, The Kabbalion. And out of the 7 Hermetic principles, the 7 Hermetic laws, it is the first one. And it says that the all is mental. So the entire universe is mental. The same mental power that we have to imagine things in our mind is the same operational, basically operating system that the entire universe is working upon, is contingent upon. So with that being said, guys, this whole art of manifesting, the science of manifesting, is absolutely crucial that you are able to imagine it and to feel it real, because that is what allows us to then believe it and achieve it. And now I want to also bridge the gap here, because I mentioned, why am I bringing in Coue into this? Because this is all very, very easily understood. This is very simple language to describe a lot of the stuff that Neville talks about. And the teachers that are teaching Neville stuff today talk about. But this is very, very crucial to understand, that you need to be able to imagine, because your act of will and trying to force it, he even mentions, he makes a point that if your imagination is opposed to it, the imagination first will beat it, but then the more you try, the worse results you're going to get. Meaning that if you really start beating your head against the wall and you keep imagining that you're not going to be able to do it, your results will get worse and worse and worse. So let's us here now read, because I just watched Napoleon Hill's movie, Think and Grow Rich. Of course, he's not the one that produced the movie. It was produced by Bob Proctor, because Napoleon Hill obviously isn't around anymore. And actually, even Bob Proctor himself recently passed on, but this movie was released a few years ago. Now, this is a quote from the end of the movie, Think and Grow Rich. It says, "Cherish your visions and your dreams, as they are the children of your soul, the blueprints of your ultimate achievements." I love this, because this sounds very much like something that Neville would say, okay? But he's talking about it from this aspect of achieving what it is that you want. So here, create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once, whether you're ready or not, to put this plan into action. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Wow, guys, that is so on point, because the more that you think like this, the more that it will be true for you, the more that you are using mental alchemy to your advantage. If you think that you will be given an advantage in any situation, then you will. And that is what Neville preaches with the bridge of incidents. He says, well, this may not at this time appear to be working in my favor, but I know that in retrospect, at the end, by living in the end, by continuing to live in the end, I will see that this gave me the seed of this benefit that Napoleon is talking about here. So do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you have, because the universe likes action, guys. The better tools will be found as you go along. Start your momentum going. Desire is the starting point of all achievement. Not hope, not a wish, but a keen pulsating desire which transcends everything. And that is what Neville talks about with the law. The desire. The desire being the faith in the wish being fulfilled. The faith in the desire being fulfilled. The oak sleeps in the acorn. The bird waits in the egg. And in the highest vision of your soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry, which she has never divulged, nature wraps up in the impulse of strong desire that something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no such reality as failure. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And that right there, I feel like it's like a bomb being dropped, because especially all of that, first of all, the dreams being the seedlings of reality, the metaphor there. And Neville himself has, so there's some quote about it be long, but wait, because, the seed has been planted for your desired reality, and it will come to harvest. And of course, he discusses all of these things at length, which have a lot of parallels to what is being said here. But the last final line, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And that is also being summed up in this line right here, that what Coue is saying, whatever the mind is filled with, the mind can conceive, so that means imagine what your mind can imagine. It can then believe. Feeling is the secret. It can then live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you imagine it, you imprint it onto this reality, and then it can achieve in the 3D reality. And that's what he says here with dreams are the seedlings of reality. And that's what Neville talks about all the time. And that is what Coue is saying with this. He said the most powerful thing is imagination. And the more that you can be relaxed and use less effort, the better. But of course, if the will is in alignment, and so the day-to-day activities that you're doing, because whatever the mind is filled with will change the action. That's what Coue and Napoleon are talking about in this. It will affect the actions that you take. So you want to get your SP. So now you're out and about and you actually strike up conversations with people. You're talking about, I'm going to get my SP. I know she's coming or he's coming. I know they're there. I know that they're waiting for me. I know I'm a great catch. I know I'm a great person. I know that and you fill your mind up with this constantly. So the negative thought impulses that come to you, they don't have time to take root anymore because you are now saturating, you're filling your mind with this new imagining that you are this great person. You are a great girlfriend or boyfriend to whoever it is that you want to be, to your SP. And you are allowing this new reality to come into being because you are declaring it for yourself over and over and over again. And that's what Sammy Ingram talks about all the time. It's just like, no, like this is happening. This is happening. And it's active affirming. It's robotic affirming. It's just the constant repetition of this. It can be, this is how you can do this because that's what Coue says too. He says, you cannot think of two things at once. You cannot think of two opposite things at the same time. You can only think of one thing at a time. So you might as well keep just filling your imagination with this. You might as well just keep filling your imagination with all of these things that inspire you. And so, I would recommend if you want to check out, watch this movie. This movie was pretty inspiring for me. I love the last lines of this movie. Cherish your visions and your dreams. They are the children of your soul, the blueprints of your ultimate achievements. And I think that this is something that Neville, if Neville was hearing this, or if Neville had heard this, or was around this type of information, he would definitely agree with this. It would definitely be in alignment with everything that he teaches. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire. Begin at once, whether you're ready or not. That is what will make the universe respond in kind. Every adversity, every failure brings with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. These are beautifully, beautifully written, these statements here. Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you have, and better tools will be found as you go along. Desire is the starting point of all achievement, not hope, not a wish, but a keen, pulsating desire which transcends everything. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits in the egg. In the highest vision of your soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. Through some strange, powerful principle of mental chemistry, nature wraps up in the impulse of a strong desire that which recognizes no word as impossible and accepts no reality as failure. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Anyways, guys, that's the end of this video. Remember, key takeaways from this. The mind cannot think of two things at once that are opposites of each other. It can only think of one. When the will and the mind, imagination are opposed, the imagination always beats the will. The force of the imagination is proportionate to the square of the will, as in the imagination is multiple times more powerful than the will. The will and the imagination, when the will and the imagination are in alignment and agreement, they multiply each other. And so it has a compounding exponential effect. The imagination can be directed. So you can direct your imagination. You do not have to succumb toward negative thoughts. You can keep continually redirected. It takes discipline though. You can't have a lazy mind and do this. You have to be active about this and proactive about what you're thinking. You have to weed the garden of the mind. You have to till out those seeds. You have to root out those seeds, those negative thoughts, those negative beliefs. And when the mind is filled with the thought, whatever the mind is dominantly filled with, That's why if you think for a few moments, or you do your affirmations for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but then your baseline main mental state, main mental avenue that you're traveling down, or mental diet is, well, what if it's not going to work out because of this, this, and this? And, I really don't know because of this, like, I don't know if I can get that house because the housing market's pretty bad right now. And, I don't know if I'll be able to get the payments, and actually the realtor hasn't messaged me back yet. So I don't really know if I'll be able to, all of that. If that's what you're going back to after doing your affirmations, and that's the dwelling place that you dwell in, that you spend most of your time in, then that's not going to work, guys. It has to be going back. Your mind has to be filled with the intention, with the autosuggestion, with the affirmation that is in alignment with your desire. Anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think about this. I really think this is a very, very key instrumental understanding and insight as far as understanding the laws of the mind and manifestation at its core. It really has to do with where we are mentally dwelling, our mental resting place, the fulfilling of the mind, and where the imagination is, because like we said, the imagination and the imagination always beats the will. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.